We begin this hour with the removal of Donald Trump's name from the exterior of the Kennedy Center. 177 days after Trump's Kennedy Center appointed board voted to rename the iconic performing arts venue that was designated by Congress as a living memorial to the late President John F. Kennedy. The letters that spelled out Donald J. Trump will no longer appear above Kennedy's. Crews worked overnight to once again return the outer facade back to how it once was. The results were hidden behind a tarp that was put up a few hours ago. The board's decision to rename the center faced immediate legal challenges that continued through yesterday when a federal judge and a federal appeals court rejected Trump's last-ditch attempt to keep his name adorned on the outside of the center. Joining us now from outside the Kennedy Center is MS Now reporter Nnamdi Ighoanwu. Nnamdi, thanks for joining us on such short notice. It's obviously been a whirlwind at the Kennedy Center. Why is that tarp up behind you? What's going on over there?
Well, yeah, Jackie. So that tarp went up late Friday, actually, as we were awaiting that court ruling about whether or not the administration would get their stay and be able to keep their name affixed to this building. Obviously, when that court ruling didn't go their way, this tarp was erected as workers behind that tarp started removing letters of the president's name from the building. Now, it's unclear if that work is done because they put that tarp up and left at around 3:30 a.m. this morning. So it's unclear how far they got, but we do know that they were ordered by a court to remove the president's name, which was, of course, added last year, which came amid his takeover of this institution generally. If you remember, one of the first actions the president took was replacing the board of trustees of the Kennedy Center with his own appointed allies. He wasn't able to replace the ex officio members of that board, which are people who were appointed by law members of Congress that have to be on it, including Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, who sued very quickly after the decision was made to add the president's name to this building, arguing that by law, by Congress has mandated this be a memorial for President Kennedy. Any change to that, any rebranding has to go through legislative means, and arguing that didn't take place. A court, at least for now, agreeing with that perspective. But I'll tell you, just being here this morning, you're still seeing people come here and take notice of the fact that there is now a tarp blocking this, wanting to see where the process is, how far the administration has gone in complying with this ruling. It was funny. I saw a woman who was taking a picture and asked her what she planned on doing. She said she's going to post it on her story today with the tarp, with the Mary J. Blige song, Goodbye Gorgeous, or Hello Goodbye, and then tomorrow post one with the song Good Morning Gorgeous. So there's people who are watching and excited to see this taking place and optimistic that it's, in the words of one woman I spoke to, a sign that democracy is still at work, that the rule of law still does matter, and that this administration is going to have to comply with the decision they may not be happy with.
I'm going to have to familiarize myself with that song, unless Jonathan or you. Okay. All right.
I think I bungled the name, but
you messed it up. But that's okay, Nnamdi. Okay. You're young.
You know what I meant. You know what I meant.
Nnamdi Ighoanwu, thank you so much, and we'll probably be in close contact with you. And we'll have a little bit more on this story later with Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. But meanwhile, stunning new reporting from MS Now reveals the latest example of the Trump administration's efforts to assert more control over our elections and challenge how states conduct them. As our MS Now colleagues write, FBI agents on Thursday raided the Cleveland offices of the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, a pro-democracy organization that helps register voters in that state. That's according to 3 people briefed on the search who told MS Now. Agents also fanned out across the state, showing up at the homes of the group's leaders and staff members, carrying some subpoenas and seeking information and electronic devices. The FBI and DOJ didn't respond to MS Now when asked for comment. And all of this comes as Trump continues to push his baseless claims that the recent California primary elections were, quote, rigged, which has Democrats warning that Trump is just laying the groundwork to challenge the upcoming midterm election results. Joining us now is Nevada Attorney General Aaron Ford, who as of this week is also the Democratic nominee for governor. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and congratulations on your primary win. I want to ask you about this scoop from our colleagues overnight on Thursday night. Has anything similar to this happened in Nevada yet? And are you worried, and are you taking any preparations for potentially warrantless searches like what happened in Ohio?
Well, good morning, Jackie, Eugene, Jonathan. Great to see you all. I clearly like y'all a lot. It is barely 6 o'clock in Las Vegas, but I get a phone call from you all. I want to jump on, especially to talk about these important topics. And look, I will tell you this. We've not quite heard about these warrantless searches out here, but I live by a saying that I stay ready so I don't have to get ready. The fact is, we have defeated Donald Trump and his cronies in court dozens of times, including several of which relate to elections. I'm actually leading 2 elections lawsuits now, pushing back against Donald Trump, trying to break the law relative to taking over states' roles in elections. He's trying to cheat at the end of the day. We don't stand for it. And what's interesting is that we have a governor in my state that is his lapdog, is his doormat, lays down and makes the same types of complaints about mail-in voting when we know that both Donald Trump and Joe Lombardo voted by mail. And so at the end of the day, we're going to continue to stand up as opposed to lie down, which is what my governor does with Lombardo, and be ready to push back against any attacks on our election system here.
Mr. Attorney General, I want to shift from Ohio to a new Postal Service proposal. And that Postal Service proposal, according to a New York Times headline, would block mail ballots in states that don't turn over data. I'm going to read something to you. The rule proposed last week is vaguely written, but appears to establish broad authority for the agency to intervene in the mail voting process. It calls on states to compile lists of mail voters that Postal Service employees would use to screen ballots for eligibility. If states refuse to comply, the agency could refuse to send their ballots. I want to be very clear about a couple of things, and you tell me, you're the lawyer. The U.S. Postal Service, frankly, the federal government doesn't actually have a hand in our elections. It is done by the states. It is handled by the states. So this would be unprecedented. That's one. 2, this is all part of President Trump's humongous lie. It's not even a big lie at this point, that there is major fraud in the United States when it comes to voting that would be enough to change elections. That is a lie. That is not true. However, he now has the tools of government and apparently the USPS that he may use to refuse to allow voters to exercise their constitutional rights. What's your answer if that hits Nevada?
Yeah, well, we're already engaged in conversations internally, but also externally about engaging with the USPS on this issue. We're leading that effort as well. You hit the nail on the head. It is a lie. It is not true that there is widespread voter fraud in our elections. In fact, right here in Nevada, MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has recently said that we are the #2 ranked state when it comes to voter integrity and voter security. We run great elections here. They're free, they're safe, they're open. And at the end of the day, that's been what has carried the day when I not only meet Donald Trump in court, but beat him in court. But again, what we should have in a governor is someone who stands up for our state, who says we need to push back against these lies about the integrity of our elections so that people can have confidence in our elections. They should have the confidence because, again, objectively speaking, we have some of the best run elections in the state. And that's from, again, an objective third-party overseer, not us internally patting ourselves on the back. But again, I beat Donald Trump in court dozens of times. And if I have to go to court over this, we'll beat him again.
Well, Attorney General Ford, you might have to go to court over something else that could potentially happen. Our colleague David Rode yesterday, I'm going to put up this headline from MS Now. Republican senators block effort to bar federal troops from election interference. Republican members of the Senate Armed Services Committee blocked a Democratic effort Thursday to strengthen existing bans on federal troops entering polling stations or seizing ballots or voting machines, two senators told MS Now. Democrats called the Republicans' opposition to the measure deeply alarming and predicted that President Donald Trump would deploy federal troops in an effort to interfere in this November's midterm elections, which polls suggest his party will lose. Attorney General, can you do anything to stop President Trump, to stop the Trump administration from bringing federal troops to your state during the elections?
Well, first off, it begins with saying we don't want that. And if the governor himself would speak up to say we don't want that, I would love to be aligned with him in this particular effort. While I won't reveal internally what we are contemplating in the event that takes place, I will say that we're not going to take a line down. I always stand up against these types of efforts. But here's what's interesting about this, Jonathan. They're focusing on these elections. We just had some elections on Tuesday, and I am indeed the Democratic nominee for governor, honored to be that. Our focus in getting there, though, was on what people need. The affordability crisis that this Lombardo-Trump economy has wrought upon all of us, that is what they should be talking about. That's what they should be focusing on, not this nonsense that continues to try to undermine people's belief in our election system.
Attorney General Ford, before we let you go, you said that you were already engaging, I think, with the USPS when it comes to this new proposal. What do you mean by engaging?
I mean, we've had conversations already with certain individuals at the USPS to let them know that these types of actions are indeed on Nevada's radars, but not just Nevada's radars, other attorneys general's radars as well. And we want them to understand that, to the extent they are going to do something that we think violates the law, we'll meet them in court and beat them in court. But we want to be able to cooperate and coordinate to the extent we can stop what we consider to be the overreach that Donald Trump continues and consistently engages in when it comes to taking over states' roles and efforts in the election space.
Nevada Attorney General Aaron Ford, the newly minted Democratic nominee for governor of Nevada, in case you didn't pick up on that and almost every answer you gave us. Thank you, as always, for coming to the weekend.
Thank you. I must say one more thing, though. They need to check out my website, FordForNevada.com.
Attorney General Ford, thank you very much.